On this episode of the Indie Author Weekly Reading Challenge.
Do you think we'll ever see in our lifetimes medicine go the direction that we see at the beginning in We Are Saul?
It's about a man living in what he thinks is an ordinary life, and an accident befalls him. Someone offers him a chance for a second chance at life. But of course, with all second chances, there's a price to pay.
Tag along as author Robert Gadke interviews writers and artists about their books, works, and lives. Be part of the journey as these amazing people pursue dreams of fame and fortune.
Welcome to the Indie Author Reading Challenge. I am your host, Robert Gadke. I'm so excited to have you here today. We have a great show. Joining us from across the pond is author Richard D. Mr. D is the author of the book We Are Saul and 17 other novels, along with, I think, 3 collections of short stories and a nonfiction book, so he is quite prolific. Very interesting interview. I think you'll enjoy it. If you haven't read We Are Saul yet, highly recommend it. At the end of the video, stick around. At the end of the interview, I'll give my review of We Are Saul, but I will tell you, I don't think it spoils much to say, it is an amazing book, and you should get it. So, before we get to the interview, a little bit about me this week. Kind of a slow week. So Monday was the 4th of July here in the United States, so kind of recover from a holiday, I suppose. A couple things that have occupied me this week. One, in a very good way, I got back to writing on a daily basis. I had sort of taken a few weeks off, kind of by design, sort of not by design. And part of it was because I was spending that time immersed in learning the cultural phenomenon that is TikTok. And I will tell you, after several weeks of trying to understand TikTok, I have no idea. I am no closer. I mean, I am closer in the sense that I can understand and navigate the interface. I think I can make aesthetically better videos. I talked last week about, difficulties I had within the app with regard to using music, royalty-free music that I get on other sources. But the thing that I really have made no progress on at all is understanding kind of how the app works from a more holistic / grounding / fundamental perspective. And what I mean by that is, when I go on the app, so when I joined the app, I joined it in this class I had had taken with these 2 individuals who are kind of TikTok experts on Book Talk in particular. And one of the things they said was that, at least at the beginning, you should avoid engaging in TikTok in a way other than Book Talk, because you want to train the algorithm to recognize what you're interested in, which in my case would be books, right? Because I'm there to try to fundamentally sell books. And so I've done that. I've tried to avoid as much as I can the other parts of TikTok. But what's difficult for me in the world of Book Talk is trying to understand what people like about TikTok. I mean, and I say that understanding and knowing full well that the people who may listen to the show may come from TikTok. You may all be great fans of TikTok. You may just love the app TikTok. And I want to be someone who likes the app. But I'm really struggling with understanding it and with finding its value. I mean, I'm there, like I said last week, because one of the great things about TikTok, at least so I'm told, is that it really promotes good content. It values good content over the relationships between quote unquote friends or followers that you might see in other social media apps. And that makes a lot of sense to me. The thing I struggle with, though, is finding any content that I actually like on the app. Now, one of the things I'm trying to do with this Indie Author Reading series and then this podcast that accompanies it is trying to present real creative content so that we can form a community of indie authors and actually have some sort of relationship that transcends a 5, 15, 30-second video. But when I actually watch the app, particularly stuff that comes on Book Talk, I don't find it enjoyable. I mean, so this morning I was looking at Book Talk and I saw one video that came up in my feed was a woman, a younger woman, probably 20-ish. And she was, I think this was in Europe, because she was looked to be on the inside of like a train car of some kind. And she was kind of looking sort of sad. And then the text said something like, when you exceed 10 books on your TBR. Now, TBR, for those of you who don't know, stands for to be read. And that's it. That was the entirety of the video. People were commenting on this. People were sharing it. People were liking it. And I thought to myself, like, I don't want to watch this. Like, what do I care if you have more than 10 books on your to be read shelf? Like, why is this a problem? You know, the next video, so I swiped up. The next video that I saw was an author who told us that she was a multi-award winning author. Congratulations, right? But that's what she puts on the text so that we all read it. She's a multi-award winning author who is struggling with the use of semicolons. And so there's like a picture. She has this picture of her looking at like the Google homepage where she's searching, like, how do I use semicolons or something? And again, people are engaging with this video. They're watching it. They're liking it. They're forwarding it. And that's the entirety of the video. And I looked at that and I was just like, okay. I mean, it's a good relevant point in the sense I do think the use of semicolons is something we can all think about and whether or not we should be using them and why and when. And I definitely am not suggesting that I'm somehow better than her. I mean, I find myself frequently looking up things on Google or within the grammatical sphere that I find on the internet because I'm using words wrong or I don't know how to punctuate a sentence or something. So that's all very legitimate and all very relatable. What I don't understand is how that content is enjoyable. Like, who's consuming that content? Who likes that content? And what's the point of the content? Because I don't want to see it. And that's where I really struggle as a user on TikTok. And I think also as a creator on TikTok, because my wife frequently tells me that I probably would have far more followers, far more views, far more engagement if I made those sorts of videos, because apparently that's what people on these social media platforms actually want to see. And as evidence of that, she showed me a video that was very popular, I guess, right now on Facebook. And it's this teacher, you know, because we're in the beginning of July, so schools have closed here in the United States. So there's this teacher who's putting away her classroom and there are like pictures. She's got like some sort of photo montage set to music or something where like she shows these pictures of her, you know, oh, here's my classroom closed. Here's the bookshelf put away for the summer. And that's it. Like, and she's got hundreds of thousands of views and people are interacting with that. And I scratch my head because the things that I really follow, the things that I really like I was trying to think to myself, what do I really follow and like on social media right now? And the answer is very little. But if you consider YouTube to be social media, which I do, it's similar, right? I mean, people are making content. There's a gentleman on there named Benjamin McAvoy, and he runs this organization called the Hardcore Literature Book Club, where he talks about the great books. And he goes through them, you know, everything from Shakespeare to Don Quixote to he goes through everything, even all the way up to Cormac McCarthy and Blood Meridian, and all these different sort of books that people have said are important or have stood the test of time. He talks through them, what they have meant to him, how they have changed his life, and he's growing this whole community, right? And he's making this really in-depth content. I love it. I consume it. I watch it. I can see why people would watch that. I could see why you would watch videos on plants or on anything you're interested in, right? I mean, that's what I can see. I just don't see that on TikTok. I mean, what I see on TikTok are people like making these little 15-second supposedly entertaining videos. And I don't know how they build a following because everything's pushed out on the FYP randomly. So I don't even know how that works. I really don't understand that. But I think to date, I've only seen, I think one video that I can recall that I actually enjoyed, right? And it was one of those 15-second videos where someone is just, you know, basically making a skit, and it was this cow that was like trapped behind a fence, like a barbed wire fence, you know, it was supposed to be electrified or something. And this farmer steps over the fence, and the cow just can't understand how the guy doesn't get electrocuted or whatever. That's like the entire thing. Funny, right? But I don't. is sort of mindless, right? I mean, it doesn't make us smarter or better or more engaged or more connected. It just wastes our time. And the other thing that I see that's just happening to me, and I may be unique in this, I don't know, but I definitely am getting a lot of spam or bots that are trying to follow me in order to get me to follow them. And this fortunately for me hasn't really been a problem because, I don't know, sometime back I just decided I'm not following people. Like I do follow some, like I follow the people who are my guests on my show. I follow some pretty interesting big name people who I think relate to what I'm making. And then I've also probably got 350 followers who I just followed originally when I started TikTok, but I just don't do that anymore. And so I get all these follow requests from these random numbers and letters accounts with pictures of beautiful women on them that have in their profile say something like, are you lonely? Contact me for a good time or something. And I don't respond. I don't follow them back. I do nothing. And then within a day or two, they go away from my profile. So I see my, number of followers tick up by one, then it ticks down by one, ticks up by one, ticks down by one. So I don't know. That seems to be a problem that people are encountering. But the other thing, and this relates to that, this idea that there are this follow idea. I just don't know why people why do you want to follow people? I'm trying to understand that too. I know there's this etiquette, some people say, because people have all these like reader follow parties. Like if you listen to the audio, and I did that, I'll say that's like the number one most popular video I've ever made. When I first started, I did this reader follow party thing. And the audio says something like, follow me or like my video and I'll follow you back. And then it ends with something like, yay for more book friends. And I just don't understand what the heck that's even about. I mean, these people aren't friends. We don't engage with them. And we don't even watch their content, right? Because everybody watches what's pushed out by algorithm on the FYP. So I don't know. I'm scratching my head here. If you have an answer for me, if you know how it is I can actually get value out of this app other than just waste my time on it, I'm all for you. I'm all for it. Send me a comment, make a comment, send a question, something like that. Because what I really like are what we're trying to do here, which is this actual engagement with people. And what I really wanted when I started this indie author reading challenge was my hope would be that people would read these books of these authors that we're picking, right? That many people don't know. And that we would not only read their books and help them financially, by flipping through them in Kindle, but more than that, people will be talking about their books. And that people would comment and talk. But what I'm finding is that's not really what I'm getting. What I'm getting more so is getting quite a few comments, messages, things like that, where people want me to read their books, but they don't want to read anybody else's book. And so we'll kind of play with this concept and what's working, what's not working, and how can we retool this? Because I really want us to be helping indie authors get exposure, sell books, and find readers, right? And I think that's what's really important is that some of these indie authors, and I would say maybe most of these indie authors, are creating some pretty cool content, and it's just not getting seen yet. And so that is absolutely the case with our guest today, Richard D. His book is amazing, like I said, and so is his interview. Without further ado, Richard D., welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we are on a little bit of a delay because Mr. D is across the pond, as they would say, from me in the United States. So we'll try not to talk over each other as much as we can, but try to be patient with us, dear listeners. All right. So Mr. D is the winner, if you want to call it that, of our second week of the Indie Author Weekly Reading Challenge. And I am reading, as we're recording this on a Wednesday, July the 6th of 2022. So I'm not done with Mr. D's book yet, but I can tell you that what I've read so far is extraordinary. And it's his most recent book, published, I believe, in June of this year. Is that right, sir?
That's right, the 1st of June. Yeah, I actually wrote it as part of the NaNoWriMo challenge last year. And I got it edited just after Christmas and then formatted it and got it all ready myself to be published in June.
And it's called We Are Saul, and it's an extraordinary book. And it's one of those books where I don't want to tell you too much about it because it could give away the storyline, because the story is quite good. But just before we started the interview here, I was talking with Mr. D off the air, and one of the things I was about to say was that I feel like this book really has the potential to have interest from Hollywood types, because I think the story is really remarkable. So I'm going to let him tell you just a little bit about what he feels comfortable sharing without giving away too much. So Mr. D, tell us a little bit about what We Are Saul is about.
Okay, it's about a man living in what he thinks is an ordinary life, and an accident befalls him, and that life is taken away. And while he's laying in hospital feeling sorry for himself, someone offers him a chance for a second chance at life, I suppose, if you like. But they won't tell him anything about how it's going to happen, just that there's a chance there if he'd like to take it, and he's either in or out. What will he do? So Saul is feeling pretty sorry for himself, because obviously the life he thought he had's gone forever. And the doctors advise him that he's better off not getting his hopes up and trying for another life, but just to be content with what he's got. But against their advice, he goes for it and just waits to see what'll happen. And the story really is about the surgery he undergoes and the effect it has on him, and the fact that he actually gets a second chance. But of course, with all second chances, there's a price to pay. And as the book goes on, you find out more and more what that is.
So without spoiling anything, so you mentioned that Saul undergoes a surgical procedure, and that happens fairly early in the book, I would say. Can you tell us just a little bit about, like, where did the idea for We Are Saul come from?
I wrote a short story about 2 years ago that was a rough sort of precursor to We Are Saul, and since then I do a lot of research for all my novels, and I was looking at something else, and I found this article about nanobots and about how they could be used in a programming system connected also to xenobots, which are based on stem cells, and they're actually alive. And there was a bit of AI, artificial intelligence, coming in there as well, and all these things sort of merged together in my brain as they do. And I thought, well, how about if surgery could use nano and xenobots to affect someone's brain function and what they could do? And the idea really came from that, in that Saul could be made to live again.
And do you have any sense of, do you think we'll ever see in our lifetimes medicine go the direction that we see at the beginning in We Are Saul?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not medical myself, but my family are, and also quite a few of the people that I know. And I've discussed the way I've written We Are Saul and the medicine and the logic behind it, and they all tell me that it's something that is possible within the next few years. And I've tried to create a sense through the book that Saul could be real, and the effects on Saul could be among us now, and we wouldn't necessarily know that they were there.
And I think I'll just say that that's the part of the book that I was most moved by. You know, when I originally picked the book, and for those out there listening who haven't seen my little TikTok video where I picked the book, I did like a random spinner wheel, and I just landed on We Are Saul. And I really hadn't read the review at all. I hadn't read the sales copy at all, and I absolutely hadn't read any reviews of the book. All I saw was that it was about a man who was paralyzed, and I think it was something like he was paralyzed and he's learned to live, or given a chance to live again, or something like that. And I was initially thinking, boy, this seems like a real downer. Like, that's what I thought. Like, oh no, I'm gonna be in this book that's a real downer, and like, you know, because I have friends of the family who've been paralyzed, and this is a very traumatic, terrible thing that can happen to a person. But that is not at all what this book is.
Okay, I wanted to start by shocking people, if you like, and saying, look, here's Saul. He's an active bloke. He did all sorts of things. He was an adventurer, a risk taker, extreme sports, all that sort of stuff. And suddenly, through a random act, everything's gone. And he's sitting there with everything's gone, and he doesn't know what to do. And in a way, he wishes that it had been a more complete accident, if you like, and that he wouldn't be laying there at all. And then someone says to him, here's another chance. And without really thinking of any other ramifications, he thinks to himself, well, yes, if I get a second chance, then I can go back and I can change some of the things that perhaps I shouldn't have done, or the things that I did wrong. But then as the book goes on, you find that really there's a price to pay for everything, and life doesn't always work out how you planned it. And without giving too much more away than that, let's say that Saul's new life takes on a form that he wasn't expecting, but is in the end just as good as the life that he missed.
Well, and that's why I thought it could be something like a Hollywood type movie, because it struck me very much as almost like a Matrix scenario. I mean, it's not the same, but in a sense, the Matrix movies were so popular here in the United States, I think throughout the world. You know, they made many, many sequels, and it's just there's so much opportunity.
I wanted it to be that sort of Matrix, Avatar, Terminator, RoboCop sort of idea, but I wanted a twist. I didn't want to go down the formulaic sort of route of those films, which were great films and great ideas, but I didn't just want to be another copy of that. So I've put a twist in there, which you'll come to, obviously, when you get on a bit further through the book, and I don't want to give it away, but I think it's a twist that changes everything.
Yes, well, I think it's extraordinary. I think there's a lot of potential for it.
Thank you.
At least as a storyline for a lot of people out there to read it. So if you haven't picked up We Are Saul yet, and you're listening to this podcast, please go get it and read it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. So I know this isn't your first book.
No, it's not.
You've written, I think we were talking like 18 novels and then 3 short stories and also another book. Did you always want to be a writer? Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
No. I was hopeless at school. My English teachers despaired of my inability to string more than 2 or 3 words together. I spent all my working life on ships, and I found it difficult to write letters home. I could never think of anything to say. I mean, no matter what I saw or where I went, I always had trouble writing it all down. And then one day I had a dream, and the next night I had the same dream, and then I just keep getting that dream, and I didn't know what to do with it. But it was a dream about a man like me who was on a ship, except he was on a spaceship, and he was having adventures. And in the end, I wrote it down because I couldn't think of what else to do with it, and I just hoped it would go away and leave me alone. And I wrote it down, and that night I had another dream, which was a continuation of the first, if you see what I mean. And the more I wrote down, the more I saw. And in the end, I realized I had a book. And that was 10 years ago, and I'm still going now. I'm still getting dreams and still seeing stories in my head, and I just keep writing them down, really.
So one of the things you mentioned I saw on a blog post, you had written a blog post, it's either somewhere on Amazon or on your website, called something like I Was Never a Writer. And you mentioned in that post about how when you used to, when you were working on these big ships, that you would bring a book with you and that then you would leave a book there. And you said you saw all sorts of different genres of books on these ships. I mean, was there a particular kind that the people who worked on these ships like to read, or was it really all over the board?
It was everything. There was something of everything, and because you're there and you're a captive audience, as it were, you read everything. You read the labels on cereal boxes. You read whatever's there in front of you. I'd always liked science fiction. I grew up reading science fiction, and it had always fascinated me. And I think that's why I gravitated towards writing that. But I don't just write science fiction. I write other stuff as well. And it seems that the ideas that come to me can take any form, really. And I just see it and write it down now. I don't argue with it. I just see it, and there it is.
Well, and so that's a great natural segue into a question I wanted to ask you about another genre you write in, which is steampunk. Now, for those like me out there who don't read steampunk and who have no idea what the heck steampunk is, can you tell us what is it and how did you find yourself writing it?
Okay, steampunk is really, if you imagine the mid 1850s or 60s, so Victorian sort of era in the UK and just Civil War thereafter in America, there was no oil, there was no electricity. But there was a lot of science and technology about. So there were steam trains and there were, all sorts of other devices. And I just based my steampunk world on that age, but brought it up to date. So I thought, what could we have done without oil or electricity? And when you actually look at it, there are lots of things you can do. You can do most things that you have today. You can have computers, you can have jet engines, you can have all sorts of things, robots. And I just basically wrote stories about them.
And you also have a series based on a detective. Is that right?
Yeah, that all came from a bet. I'd written a couple of science fiction stories with male lead characters, and I have a wife and 3 daughters, incidentally. And my wife said to me, "Why do you always write male characters? What, can you write a female character?" I bet you couldn't, you see. So I had to think about it, and I didn't just want to write a female science fiction sort of superhero thing like the males. So I had to think, and I'm a fan of Agatha Christie, and I'm also a fan of cozy mysteries. And I thought, how about have a female amateur detective, but in space? So I can still use the science fiction, but I can write a few crime stories as well. So I invented a character called Andorra Pet. I put her on a space station where there was a murder, and I let her solve it, basically.
So I have just started reading Agatha Christie novels. Tell me, what do you think is the best Agatha Christie novel, and what is your worst Agatha Christie novel that you've read?
A lot of the earlier ones can be hard going. The ones that have been made into films in general, like Death on the Nile or Murder on the Orient Express, are easier to read. Some of the older ones are, as I say, they're very wordy, and you've got to concentrate all the way through. But they're very cleverly plotted, and if you are prepared to take the time to read them, then you won't be disappointed. You'll very rarely be able to work out who the murderer was until you're actually told. But when you can see and when you know who it is, it's just so obvious to you because there have been clues scattered all the way through that point you in one direction.
So earlier this year in the United States here, we can access this app on our phones called like BBC Sounds or whatever. And they have on there an old Death on the Nile radio play, I guess. And I was listening to that and I thought, boy, this is actually quite good. And then I told my son, oh, this is such a good radio play. We should watch the Hulu version of Death on the Nile. You're going to really enjoy it. And I'll say we got about 25 minutes into it. And he said we had to turn it off because it was so terrible. It's just like, I was like, the BBC version is so much better than the Hulu version.
Mm-hmm. I think that's often the trouble with adaptations. You have to miss some bits out, and very often, unfortunately, you miss out the wrong bits. It's condensing a long novel into an hour and a half, which is tricky to do.
The coloring on the Hulu version is quite amazing. If you've never seen the version that's on available commercially, it's really good cinematography. It's just the story is, like you say, not necessarily as moving as it was kind of, I guess, on the radio play. But hi, it's Rob Gatke. So if you're enjoying the show and looking for a way to support me and my writing, please consider buying a copy of my latest book and reviewing it on Amazon. The book is called The Pursuit of Being Noticed. It is a funny, fun adventure about a female lawyer and her sister and their mother. And it also has heart too, which I think is the most important thing about a good story. So if you're looking for something to read this weekend, please consider picking it up. And now back to our show. Tell us, so you've got novels in all different genres. What is your favorite novel out of all the books you've written?
Oh dear, that's put me on the spot there a bit. I think it's a story called Life and Other Dreams. Is my favorite. It's about, based on what happened to me, really. It's about a man that has very vivid dreams, and he dreams that he's living on another planet in the future with a different wife. Basically, his home life and his job is very boring, and this is a very exciting life that he lives in his dreams. But he thinks it's his dreams and that's it. And yet one day parts of his dreams start to encroach into his waking life. And he finds a lot of connections between the people in his dreams, and he suddenly starts meeting the same people in his waking life. And you get to a point in the end where he can't really decide if the dreams are a reality and his real life's a dream, or the other way around, if you see what I mean. And he goes through a lot of adventures. And in the end, I like to think that you're left wondering that you don't actually know which life is real. It took me a while to write it and fit it all together, but it's the one I think I'm most pleased with.
Well, if you haven't checked it out, people should find that one too. I like the idea behind it, just like I like the idea behind We Are Saul. So I'm going to ask you a couple of kind of more pointed questions based on things you've written or kind of comments you've made on different blog posts and stuff. And just give me kind of your thoughts as to where you were going with this. So I saw a post on a website called Meeting the Authors, and I think it was from like May of 2022. And you were asked a question about what are you reading right now, and you said something like that 95% of the books you read now are from unknown indie authors, partly because, and I want to get this right, it's something like, once the traditional publishing setup has a bestseller, they promote clones and derivatives of it. So can you tell us a little bit, like, what is your opinion of, or what did you mean by that?
I think if you go back a few years to the Da Vinci Code, when that first came out, I bought it straight away almost, and I loved it, and I thought it was great. And then about a month, 2 months later, I was in a local bookshop, and I saw there were all sorts of other books with the same sort of idea. It was a race against time and an ancient mystery and blah, 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 blah. But it was all the same sort of thing, all by different people and all with roughly similar covers. And I thought that it was, a lot of it was bandwagon jumping, really, in that someone saw a book and wrote something similar, or I don't know, the literary world saw a chance and jumped on it. And I think that doesn't necessarily happen so much in the indie world. People tend to be less constrained by what publishers want, and they write what they feel. And very often you get some different ideas out there that aren't necessarily popular until they take off. Like The Martian, for instance, by Andy Weir. That was a self-published book that suddenly became very huge.
In that same post, I think, or around that same section of the article, you talked about how many of the indie authors that you read now are really unknowns, that they're not names that we would have heard of otherwise. How do you go about finding these books? I mean, do you just struggle through lots of terrible books, or do you seem to find mostly good? But what do you do? What recommendations do you have for those of us who are trying to read indie authors out there?
Yeah, I'm in quite a few Facebook groups and on various forums and the like. And basically I engage with the authors on social media, and they talk about their books. And if I like the look of something, I'll go over to Amazon or wherever they're selling it, take a look, have a read of the sample. And if it takes me fancy, and like I said, I'll try any genre. I'm not fussy about that. If I read the first 5 pages and like it, then I'll read it. And then if they've written a sequel or there's another one, I'll probably read that as well. And I like then to put a review on my blog, on my website, to try and encourage other people to find them, because I think that there's a lot of writers that nobody's ever heard of. And it's a shame that they're not as mainstream as they could be,
And I totally agree with that. That's sort of why I started this idea of trying to read indie author books.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've struggled with, and then maybe you can tell me how you handle this, is because when I was on your website, I saw those book reviews from, I would imagine our indie author books, and they were all very positive reviews. And so one of the things I wonder about is, how do you handle that? Do you not write a review if you don't love a book? Do you not review every book you read, and you just review the books that really move you in some way? How have you handled that?
I will read the book and I will finish the book. And that's something I will always do. If I don't like it, or I don't think it's worth at least 3 stars, then I'll have a word with the author and basically say, look, I've read your book, but it wasn't really for me, so I'm not going to put a negative review up. I would never do that. I don't think it's, even if it's constructive, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing to do. I would rather have a word with the author, and then I'll decide not to put a review on my website. But I think that's, I think it's preferable doing it that way, to just, dashing off and writing 1 star and putting it there for everyone to see, because in the end of the day, we're all different. And the things that I like to read will not necessarily be the things that everyone else likes to read. And I'd hate to put someone off just because my opinion is different to theirs.
I agree entirely. Do you read your own reviews?
Not too often. I'll have a look every now and again, but I'm not obsessive about it. I get good reviews. I get 1-star reviews, but I look at it and think, well, I'm sure these readers are the same as me and that they don't like everything. So if I get a 1-star review, I'll shrug my shoulders and say, well, okay, that person probably isn't one of my tribe then. But thank them for having a go. They've tried to read it and it wasn't for them. Well, fair enough. I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there who, if I can find them, who will think differently. And I don't think it's necessarily a reflection on the book. It's just the fact that I found a reader that didn't particularly like it.
Well, you are much more well-adjusted, I will say, than maybe I am. I will say, just for everyone listening,
I tried to be zen about it.
yes, I will say for everybody listening, I did not see almost any one-star reviews. So.
There are one-star reviews. There are people who've said they didn't finish, and there are people who've said that it's rubbish, and there are people that have called me various things ending in ist. But that's their opinion, and they're entitled to it. You know.
So let's just say for everybody listening, I did not find many of those. Most of the reviews I found of Mr. D's work were overwhelmingly positive. So one of the things that I did see, and this was in another blog I think called Just 5 Wishes, if you remember that, which I thought was a really interesting piece. One of the things you mentioned in there, and again, we might be treading on an area you don't want to talk about, but I think it could really help other indie authors out there if you could share what you're comfortable with. So you said that, there's kind of this balancing act of promoting your work on social media, because not only can it become saturated very quickly where everybody, you're saying the same thing over and over again, but also that you can get trolled on social media. And I don't know if you can share a little bit about, like, how did you deal with that situation? What happened? What would you tell others if they have that?
It happened to me about 5 years ago now when I was trolled. And in a lot of ways, I blame myself because I was younger then and perhaps not so wise in the ways of the of social media, in that I responded. But I responded in a way that I thought was sensible. But unfortunately, things got a bit out of hand. So now I look at it, and if anybody starts, I just block them. I don't try and engage. I just block them and move on. But that's a lesson I've learnt the hard way. And sometimes that's, the only way you're going to learn a lesson, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I definitely understand that. I've had that experience in my past. So I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you that are not real in-depth ones, but I would just love to get your take on these. So number one here, Apple or PC, which do you like?
PC. I've never actually owned an Apple product apart from my iPod for my music.
All right, fair enough. A plotter or pantser? I think I know the answer to this one, but
pantser, totally.
If you were marooned on a desert island and could only take one fiction book with you, what would it be?
Oh dear. Lord of the Rings.
All right, good choice. So it wouldn't be your own. I have to, as a segue, say that I've asked that question and I've had people say their own book. And I always sort of like, I don't know what to make of that, because I realize that people want to promote their own work. But if you're reading your own book over and over, I don't. I always talk to my wife sometimes about these questions. And one of the things when I gave that question, she asked me one time, well, what would you say? And, I purposely say a novel because I don't want somebody saying the Bible or the Quran, or I just don't want that. What is the fiction book? And then my answer is always either In Search of Lost Time by Proust or Clarissa by Samuel Richardson, because I want the longest possible book there is that I could find, because I could read it over and over again as many times, But
I wouldn't be able to choose, to be honest. Which one? I don't know. Yeah. No, that's a masterpiece, and I've read it several times, and I could read it again quite cheerfully.
If you took the trilogy of Lord of the Rings, that might get you there. You got to have the big one. All right. So what is your least favorite word or phrase that you see frequently in books or novels?
Oh dear. Off the top of my head, I don't know, but something that's one word when you could have used two or three and made more of the meaning. Any word that's used lazily.
Makes sense. All right. Mine vacillates between, rolling of the eyes and shrugging unnecessarily. Sometimes when I read books and there's so many of these ways to describe how a person spoke other than said, I just kind of lose my mind when it's back to back to back to back in the paragraph. So
yeah, it's any word unnecessary.
All right. So we're about at the end here. I just have one question left for you. And you can go anywhere you want with this question.
Okay.
But if you could give all the people listening out there one piece of advice, and it doesn't have to be anything to do with writing, what would you tell them?
Keep moving forwards. Don't stop.
All right, Mr. D, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on our program.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, it's been very nice talking to you too. I really do hope that if they haven't already, that they find We Are Saul, and I hope that the people in Hollywood, because I know they all listen to this program, so I really hope that they're I'm joking. I hope that they will also find your book, because I think there's so much potential for visual representation of that work. So many books, I think, take place in the mind, but really stay in the mind. And this one doesn't have to stay in the mind. So I think it's an amazing book, and I hope you have great success with it. I hope when you become a big star and you do get to Hollywood, that you'll still come back on the show again.
Of course, I'd love to. Yeah. I'll keep my phone turned on, waiting for the call.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Okay, and the same to you. Cheers now.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Richard D. as much as I did making it. He's really an extraordinary guy. He's had an extraordinary life, been a lot of places. And I will tell you, I think this book, We Are Saul, is outstanding. And so here's my quick review of it. 100 stars, whatever I can give to it. The highest possible rating I can give is what I want to give to it. I think I jokingly referenced this in the interview, but I mean it with all sincerity now. I mean, if you know someone in Hollywood and you have contact with a producer or a director or a writer or someone, please contact Mr. D and get We Are Saul made into a film. So many bad movies out there. This one would be a good one. All right, so that brings us to this week's book. And I have to say, the first 2 weeks, I remember I did the beer pong thing, and then I did the spinner wheel by random chance. And that really served me well. I got 2 amazing books out of it. But this week I'm doing something different, which is I'm just picking the book. And I looked at my list of people who had entered, and I just picked the one I wanted to do. And I'll tell you, the one I picked, and I'm going to get this wrong, and so please bear with me when I mispronounce this, I'm sure. But it's by LaDonna, the author. At least that's the TikTok handle I see. But I think on Amazon, it's actually, I'm going to look at it here, it's L.M. Goodman. So L.M. Goodman, Despona, Goddess of Mystery, I believe is how you say it. Here is the actual cover of the book. I'll put the name in the comments, but I am super excited to read this book. Not only does it already have good ratings on Amazon, but if anyone should have our book read, it is LaDonna. And I say that because she's engaged in this contest. She read A Taste of Sweetness and made her own video on it and has recommended other people's books. And so if there's a way we can pay her back by reading her book, let's do that this week. So please follow the name in the comments. Go out and get Despona. I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm sorry, LaDonna. Despona, Goddess of Mystery. Go get it this weekend. Read it and join me. And again, fingers crossed, hopefully she will join us next week and we can talk about her book. So until next time, keep reading